I speak about how attitude is contagious and what we bring into a room is contagious as the leader or as a team member. So while we thought we felt quite comfortable resolving issues like this, and we would stop and we would just go and grab a coffee together after it. We were quite comfortable with our approach. Didn't fully appreciate the discomfort we were causing others and the harm that was doing. So when I reflect on it now with the benefit of age and 2020 vision in hindsight, how safe and healthy we were making that team feel, and how likely were people to come to either of us with a challenge or an issue.
So welcome back to the next conversation in Speaker-Driven Business. And this is another conversation with yet another one of the cool people who come into our world as clients and become somewhat of a fixture because we get along so well. I'm here today with Paul Skewes, Skewesy, as we all call him. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, Jan.
Good to have you here. Now, I'm going to kick off with a standard question we ask everybody. Where in the world are you right now?
Well, can I give you two responses?
Absolutely.
So physically, I'm in Perth in Western Australia, enjoying the turn of the season and the beautiful weather we've got at the minute. So that's geographically and physically. Philosophically or pondering, at a juncture of a whole bunch of stuff around what can we do to make leadership different and engage people differently. And some of the things I'm kind of thinking about may play out as we have the discussion today, but that's where I am philosophically and trying to bring in different elements into developing our leaders.
Yeah, we've had so many conversations about all of this, and I hope that we do unpack some of this in our conversation today because we actually have to do something different, right? It's just fundamentally not really working for the majority of the places where we've got leadership unfolding.
No, and it's not working for the people who are being led, it's not working for the leaders. And we've got a new generation that have looked at what leadership is and said, I don't want to borrow that. Thank you very much. So as we've got a large demographic is ready to move out of the workplace or getting towards the end of their professional or corporate career, whatever you'd like to call it, we're not developing people to take their place. And we've got a whole group that actually don't want to take their place.
No. And in our quieter moments, when we're actually honest with ourselves, we understand it, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a bit like AI, right? We know it's there. We just choose to ignore it a little bit because it gets a little bit uncomfortable and we don't know what to do about it. And it's the same in this space. We know it's happening, but we leaders and people just feel like I don't really know what to do about it, how to go about it. There's a whole bunch of stuff now that it brings in performative measures around the way we lead people. There's legislated and it creates a whole bunch of confusion and people say, I don't want to do that. So we'll all just sit there and ignore it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well. We've spoken previously on this podcast series. I've got a background in leadership and organizational related things and industrial relations. And I find it fascinating now, especially in heavier industries, which we'll talk about your background in just a moment. But I find it fascinating how much of leadership is actually legislated now. Right. You actually do have to be cognizant of leadership. And I'm sure we'll unpack the thought that, if we're great leaders, that's not a problem anyway. But the truth is there's a massive compliance factor to leadership now that a decade ago we didn't have. And so I'd love to end up talking about a little bit about that nexus as we unpack that, if that's okay, because I do find that really fascinating.
I would love to.
You'd love to? I thought you
I'd
might.
Love to. Yeah, I might get my soapbox out and get a little bit preachy about it, but speakers
Preach
corner.
away.
But yeah, I do hope we go there. I'd love to go there.
Yeah, absolutely. So this fascination with leadership, I'm going to let the audience assume that you're a leader and have had various roles. And obviously with unpacking and getting ready for your keynote, I'm aware of some of it. But for our audience who doesn't yet know Skewesy, walk us through this kind of 5-minute run through of who Skewesy is and how that kind of timeline of how you came to be where you are now.
Right. Well, I'm a bit older than a lot of people that listen to this and have been in our group, so I'll try and really condense it into that 5 minutes. Look, originally, I guess my leadership journey started, or my whole career journey started, in the military. So I spent 10 years in the British military, and it was at a time that was, I guess, it was still volatile with activity in Northern Ireland. So you still had what they termed as the Troubles, so the conflict there, the time of the Falkland Islands. So when the Argentinians invaded the Falklands and Margaret Thatcher as Prime Minister deployed a task force, as it was called, down to the Falklands to solve that. So it was a very different environment than the one that we've had recently in terms of Afghanistan and Iraq, etc. But that was my leadership foundation and my career foundation. And people make assumptions about the military that around what it's like, around what leadership's like. And the military is like any other organization I've been in. You get good leaders and you get not so good leaders. You get ones that actually help develop their troops and their teams, the ones that are really connected and the ones that are really performative. I ended up serving in units where you work in small teams, you are in each other's pockets, and leadership takes on a different style and different manner than most people associate with the military. So that's that's the things that I took out of that 10 years when I went into the corporate role. And I had a raft of roles, as a lot of people do when they leave the military. You get a little bit lost and you're not too sure what you want to do, because really what you were trained in, there isn't a big call for it in most corporate organizations. So you kind of, you feel your way through it. And I felt my way through it after a whole bunch of different kind of journeys into professional kitchens at one stage. Yeah, so I wanted to learn how to cook better. So I went into a professional kitchen. The reason why I stayed there as long still confounds me, because it was a terrible environment. If you wanted to look at a picture of what leadership shouldn't be, go into a professional kitchen in the 90s, because throwing pans at people and screaming at them isn't the way to get motivated. Although the fans of Gordon Ramsay would probably disagree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. He's made a whole career on it, hasn't he?
Yeah, and a really good one as well by the look of it. But I ended up, funnily enough, in the recruitment space.
Oh, we all end up in the recruitment space. I didn't realize we shared that.
Yeah, so I'd applied for a job with a recruitment company in London. And the day that I started, they said, oh, by the way, you're going to be managing the department because the guy that's there is leaving. So, okay, I know nothing about recruitment. And there was a whole story about how I ended up there with this job offer from them, because I never applied for the job. They were putting me out for other jobs. And then I started to look at, my leadership was based on the harder style of the military background that fit perfectly in the recruitment world in London in the 1990s, in the late 1990s.
Oh, that would have been a perfect match.
And I was on the contracts desk, like running the contracts desk. So it was this frantic pace. There's no computers. It's all phone. It's all contacts. It's Rolodex. And all this kind of thing. And it was just an aggressive environment. And I didn't realize it until later on about how poor my leadership with my team was great, but my interaction with other leaders in the business was absolutely shocking, and the impact that was having on people. So I kind of came back home to Australia, went into the recruitment industry, didn't like it, and then came home to Sydney. So I spent 4 years in Sydney, and then left Sydney in 2002 to come over to Perth, because we just thought it was a pretty cool place to be. We'd visited, seen friends here, quit jobs, packed up the car, and spent a few months driving across Australia on an adventure to get to Perth. And then, so since 2002, I have been in or around the resources, oil and gas industry in various guises. So some of it in recruitment, there's been business improvement. There's been a lot around leadership and capability development, which is where I've spent probably the last 14, 15 years, which brings me to where I am now, having learned a lot along the way, done a lot of self-reflection, realize the kind of leader I have been, the good, the bad, the ugly, because I think anyone in a leadership role has been all three at some stage. And then it was,
And if
there's a couple
they haven't hung around long enough.
No, they've not actually looked in the mirror hard enough either. So there was a couple of pivotal moments around my leadership journey that solidified why I'm doing what I do now and why I'm so passionate about it.
Amazing. One of the things that I just picked up on there, if we can just go back for a moment, was when you're in military and you said you ended up in smaller teams where you were in each other's pockets and really moving together as one. And you said leadership looked different because of that compared to the rest of the military. Tell me what you mean about that. Share with us what you mean that leadership looked different in that particular microcosm.
Yeah, so it was less administrative. And by that, I don't mean paper-based administration. So I think most people have this, an image of the military where it's all spit and polish and shiny boots and marching up and down parade grounds. That fell away. It was there, but it wasn't important. It wasn't the focus. And there was something that I took away so one of my troop commanders, he was saying, the goal is that the person on your left or on your right can actually do your job if we lose you. That's what has to happen. So you need to know each other's jobs well enough. But then that kind of further discussions around that and something I took forward with me is that everyone in my team, I need to have confidence. If I was to leave, there's there's one or two people within my team that have been prepared and trained to be able to step into my role. So in a corporate life, it means that if I move on, either promotion, secondment, or leave the organization should have two people ready to go that they can pick from. There shouldn't be a need to go to the external market. So I'm retaining corporate knowledge. I'm actually developing people. I'm investing in them and preparing them for their next role. And that's the kind of way we operated, which was different to the normal marchy up and down, shiny boots kind of world.
Also different, I would hazard a guess, to when you landed in corporate.
Yeah, very different. Yeah, there's an expectation of what ex-military people will look like in a corporate world. Military people have got an expectation or a concept of what the corporate world looks like. But it's no different to everywhere. So having worked in the industries that I've worked in over the past 20 odd years, people in smaller organizations have a perception about what it's like to be in the larger organizations, the big corporates. And when they get in there, they get surprised by how dysfunctional it can be, how disparate the systems are, how this thing doesn't talk to that thing, but we need them to talk to that thing. So we just make up the stuff in the middle ground and we create our own thing, which doesn't serve anybody apart from the person using that thing.
Yeah.
So we've all got these perceptions that it's all crossed, and it can be solved or it can be addressed really simply by addressing it straight up and front and setting those expectations and making stuff clear so that we're all okay.
I'm actually, for those of you who are listening rather than watching, I'm actually grinning right now because that sums up my first experience of being in a major corporate, going back in as a leadership role. So being an employee in corporate and then going back out of that was, I didn't really notice it. But that whole thing of there's the system, and there's the bit in the middle that person created, and you got to guess what that is. That literally sums up my return to corporate when I came back in a leadership role. So I was grinning along with you there because I was just like, you just summed up perfectly exactly how the ecosystem seems to function. Which was the biggest surprise to me, because having grown a multi-8-figure business myself, I expected to just be in a bigger version of that. And I definitely wasn't in a bigger version of that. You also mentioned when you're just doing this timeline that you said was going to take too long because of your age, and you did it beautifully. You said, when you were in recruitment, you're great at leading that team, but unaware of your impact on other leaders. Can we unpack that for a moment? Because that really struck me as you said it.
Yeah, okay. So it was probably more the impact on everyone else in the office. So that it was an open plan office. I was down one end of the office, and our divisional director, who was basically my boss, was at the other end of the office. And he sat in his own office, and it was floor to ceiling glass. and a glass door. So I would get, and we had a really strong relationship, a really good relationship, but we would fight, and we'd fight a lot. And it was almost like to the death. So I'd get a call from him. So it was before text and everything like this. And email wasn't really big as well. So for those who are listening who've grown up with it, that's how old I am.
That's what I
we weren't emailing each other either. Yes.
I had faxes
So
on thermal
timesheets
paper.
used to come in by fax. Yes.
Yeah, on thermal paper.
So I'd get a call from my director, and he'd just light the blue touch paper, and I'd go off like a firecracker. And I would steam up to his office. And we would have a full-on row, shouting, screaming, gloves off, although we never hit each other that I can recall. But we weren't far off it sometimes. Now, what happened, and I realized this later, so that in the office there probably would have been maybe 18 people in this open plan office in their various divisions. There'd probably about a third of the teams would sit there and go, oh, let's get the popcorn and watch what's going to unfold here. This is a little bit of entertainment during the day.
Yeah, let's go, people.
There was another third who would just put their head down and say, oh, no, I don't want this going on. And there was the final third would actually vacate. They'd go and make a cup of tea. They'd go outside and do something. They'd just physically remove themselves from the environment. So whilst my boss and I were really comfortable having this full-on war about probably something quite trivial, it's lost in the midst of time, we weren't appreciating the impact that had on those around us. I speak about how attitude is contagious, and what we bring into a room is contagious as the leader or as a team member. So while we thought we felt quite comfortable resolving issues like this, and we would stop and we would just go and grab a coffee together after it. We were quite comfortable with our approach. Didn't fully appreciate the discomfort we were causing others and the harm that was doing. So when I reflect on it now with the benefit of age and 2020 vision in hindsight, how safe and healthy we were making that team feel, and how likely were people to come to either of us with a challenge or an issue.
I'd say that's really close to none. No chance.
My team would,
chance.
because they knew how I operated with my team. But anybody external that was externally in terms of another internal department coming to us, not so likely, I don't.
So that's been in reflection. That you also mentioned there's been a couple of really pivotal moments in your leadership, in your own leadership journey. What were they?
There's two key ones. The first one was I was walking down St. George's Terrace in Perth. Now, for anybody who's not familiar with Perth, St. George's Terrace is the main thoroughfare through the CBD, and it's essentially the road on which all the majority of major organisations are housed on. And I was walking to work one morning, and there was two people in front of me, both from different organisations by the sound of it, and they grabbed their morning coffee, and they were just bitching and moaning about the quality of their leader, both of them. And they were talking, and the sad people geek inside of me just wanted to eavesdrop and continue listening to their conversation. And the things that they were talking about were so minor, but it was causing them so much frustration. And it was simple things about not being recognized. It's about not actually having time to discuss things with their leader. So it's really easy to fix, and it's like, wow. And it's like, I wonder what would my team be talking about as they were walking down with their coffee. So it's like that was a really key moment for me, that it's like when people are just really feeling uncomfortable and unhappy about stuff, it's generally not the big dramatic stuff. It's just those small things that keep on happening or not happening that drive them insane. And then the second moment, I didn't know until probably 13 years after the event, to be honest. I'd taken over a project within a team and replaced the project manager because of underperformance. And when I came into the team, the first thing I did was to have one-on-ones with people and just understand where they were at. So and it was more about them as a person, not what are you delivering. I had one individual on the team who it was their first role out of university. So they weren't on a graduate program, but it was their first full-time position. And I went through the same process with them. Now, I'd watched that person's career over time, and I just really liked the way they operated. I knew where she'd gone and the role that she was holding, and I saw a position come up advertised that was part of her team, and I thought I actually wanted to work for her. I got the job, and then it wasn't until I sat down with her and we were kind of discussing this journey and how I've come to be working for her. And she said to me, I'll never forget the first time we interacted or I sat down with you as my boss. And I was like, well, geez, to be honest, I can't remember it.
And where are we going?
But she said, it's really stuck with me for such a long time. And I thought, well, it can't be completely bad. Otherwise she wouldn't have signed off on me getting the gig with her, I'm assuming. And she said, I was flustered that you wanted to sit down and have just a chat with me that wasn't in the work environment. So I took everyone out for coffee. So let's just get into a different environment. And she said, no, I'd planned and prepped with all of these kind of notes and stats and where we're at and all the rest of it. And she said, do you know what you said to me? I said, I haven't got a clue. And she said, you said something along the lines, but you can put those away because I can actually go and find that out. I can read reports. I'm actually interested in you and where you are. And I didn't realize the impact that had had on somebody. It's like 13 years prior that they've carried that through. And that kind of sat with me, and I thought, and that gives me this is why you need to talk about this stuff. This is why you need to be educating people about this stuff, because it can be so simple. It's not easy, but it is simple. It's so simple, and yet it can have such a profound impact on people when you do it well.
Yeah. Yeah, I really, I've spoken several times in different formats and forums. My first really influential leader was Andrew Banks, who was Morgan and Banks, and we're both old enough to know who they were. And he ran in the Melbourne office. He would fly in and run Rookie Crash on a Friday afternoon. It was everyone in the boardroom. And one of the things he used to say was, I don't want your wins and your celebrations. They're on the reports. And just when he said that, it was like he wasn't interested in anything you could get in a report, right? He was interested in the things that went sideways, the things that you didn't expect to lose, the person who surprised you, the person who destroyed you, right? The deal that didn't get across the line. And then he would respond to that being raised by sharing his own war stories and what he learned himself in that scenario. And so that whole thing in that process where he made us feel very visible and also made us feel very human. And so that's exactly what she was responding to with you as well, was like, I can get that in the reports. I don't need that, right? And that was Andrew's underpinning philosophy for the whole time I was at Morgan and Banks. If it's in a report, I don't need you talking to me about it. And that, I think, is a tenet I've taken through.
It's a simple thing to do.
It is. It's really so simple.
We don't do it. We veered into this thought that it's all touchy-feely and a bit woo-woo, but it's not.
Not at all. Not at all. I'm just thinking, and obviously I do know some of your story, but I'm also just thinking you land at this point where you actually want to speak about leadership. You want to actually get out there and speak, and it's really educating from stage and getting people to think differently. It's not just you want to be a speaker on stage. What is it that really gets your attention at the moment when it comes to leadership? Like, why are you making the choice that you need to go and pursue stages and pursue platforms and talk to organizations about what we need to shift with leadership? Like, what's really got your attention about it right now?
We've made it really complicated. It's become complex. Leaders have become frightened in some areas. They're frightened of what they can say, what they can't say. I can't hold people to account anymore because they'll play I don't feel psychologically safe kind of card. Then we've got the whole psychological safety and the psychosocial hazards. And I'm not saying that that's not important. It's not relevant. It absolutely is. But it's been legislated, so people now feel that I just have to do it because it's a requirement, or it's something new that you just added to my workload. And it's like, well, we haven't added to your workload. Good leaders have done this for years. Good leadership has had this all the way along.
We should not need entire organizations dedicated to teaching leaders about psychosocial safety just because it's in legislation. We just shouldn't.
So it has become complicated. I work with leaders feeling the stress and the pain points around that. And when you start to demystify it and just make it simple, and that's what I wanted to do. That's what's got my attention, is simplifying this down to the human elements that come into it, or bringing more humanity into how you deal with leadership. And it doesn't have to be soft. It can actually be quite hard and tough conversations, but you're doing it in a way that's productive, that is beneficial for people, and you're trying to neutralize or address the potential conflict points in the way that you go about doing that. And I just wanted to bring that simplicity into things, because that's we get given so many different leadership styles, leadership models. We get model after model after model. And I've just put another one into the mix, I guess, with my own. But it's a simplistic thing that doesn't take a lot to understand. And it makes sense. And as soon as people can see that it makes sense in what they do, people are more inclined to grab onto something. If I can see it's a simple kind of let's just do 2 things a day differently across 3 spheres or 3 spectrums, and you start to shift the way that people think, people interact, and the way we do.
You mentioned before about humanity and leadership, and we've overcomplicated it. How do you know when you're walking into a team, an organization, someone you're working with, how do you know that humanity is present, and how do you know when it's missing?
You can get it depends who's in the room when you're there, and whether the leader's joining into the room or whether they're already in the room. I'll give you an example. So was it recently on a mining operation, went out to, so it's an underground operation. I went into the crib room. So for those not familiar, it's like the canteen kind of area where people will sit down and have their lunch room. So it was lunchtime, and sitting in there was the general manager of the operation and the mining manager of the operation. Now, they weren't sat there talking to each other. They were actually talking to people from the crew in there having their lunch. And it wasn't this flying visit. They were sat down eating. So how do I know when it's present? You just see it in the small behaviors of leaders. Now, contrast this with an experience I had. I was coming back from Melbourne on a flight back to Perth. I was already seated, strapped in, had the drink in my hand on the way home, and there was a senior leader from our business came into the cabin. Now, that senior leader, I worked on the same floor as them. I saw them every day. They knew who I was. They looked at me, looked away, and carried on to their seat like I didn't exist. None. So even of a morning when they came in, they would say hello to the people at the right organizational level and nobody else. So how do you know when it's present? It's the small things that you see leaders do or not do that will give me an indication. If you're going into a room, it'll be around how they respond to challenge, how they respond to people voicing things, or how willing people are or not to say things. And that just gives just to sit back and watch and observe, and you'll get, we've all got a detector. There's something inside of us that knows when the air's prickly or when it's kind of nice. And I won't say always relaxed, because in work environments, it's not always relaxed. We're there to make money. Ultimately, all businesses are there to be profitable, unless you're in the not-for-profit. But commercial businesses are there to make money. That's the reality of what we do. Is how we go about doing that. And you just get a good sense of it. We know as human beings.
Yeah, we do. As humans, we know. We have that gut instinct. You talked earlier before about, the pivotal moments. What's the thing that you learnt the most from that has shaped you the most as a leader?
Whoa, the thing that I've learnt the most. I've got a really bad poker face. So
You do.
Yeah, so I've got a really bad poker face. So I'm mindful of that. And for people who might not be familiar with that, you can see what I'm thinking on my face. I've had feedback as I'm thinking it, and there's telltale signs that I wasn't aware of that people have made me aware of. So when I'm processing, my lip twitches, which I was completely unaware of until somebody made me aware of it. And then I spoke to my wife about it, and she said, I've known that for years. So now some of the things I get quite, one of the things that really gives me the irrits is this whole, you've got to be authentic and be vulnerable all the time, because we've taken it to the extreme, and you don't need to know all my authenticity. It's bad enough that I've got it. I don't need to project that onto you as well.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be transmissible.
No, absolutely not. So that kind of gives me that lights the blue touch paper for me at times. But I do need to be open and transparent with people. And one of the things I've learned is to communicate what I am like or what my intent is. And I do things like, if you see my lip twitching, I'm not on attack mode. I'm processing stuff. So I just call out certain things, and I kind of make it quite clear and quite plain for people what they're getting. That's the biggest thing. And I don't know whether it's an age thing, because I think as you mature, you look back, some of us will look back and you reflect, you become a little bit retrospective about the way you consider things. And it's like, well, I'll ditch that, or I'll do that. I've learned this about myself. I've become a lot calmer. My family would probably disagree with that, but in a workplace, I've become a lot calmer. Because somebody said, well, Skewes, he's unflappable. My wife looked at them and said, really? Have you spent any time with the guy? So in a crisis, unflappable, I'll just remain thing, but it's, I can love. So I just become a lot more, I'm searching for a word. I just become a lot more rational about things in the way that I look at it. And it's like, well, I'll try and appreciate your perspective, because you've got your stuff, you've got your goals, or you've got your thing that you have to do. And this is the other thing you start to see within larger organizations. We have this overall thing, we've got to make X thousand widgets a day. Now we've got the widget guys who are obsessed about the X thousand widgets a day. And then we've got the maintenance team saying, well, yeah, we actually need to have time on machines. So sometimes it means that you're only going to get hundreds of widgets a day. So they've got these guys, and there's all this tension that gets created. And because of the way organizations structure that performance type elements, then that creates competition within the teams that should actually be working together. So I've become a lot more cognizant of that type of stuff, and then how you approach those situations when you're dealing with it. And that translates to the kind of people elements as well, that everybody's got stuff going on that you know nothing about. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and 80% of the time it's nothing to do with you. It's been my big learning. Who's had the greatest influence on you as a leader? So we talked about, your lessons, your insights, but who's had the greatest influence or impact on you as a leader? Who's really shaped who you are?
Yeah, there's been a number along the way, I think. And it's because leadership is not just about leadership, I don't think. Leadership is the way that you look at the environment that you're in. And there's been some points along my timeline where I've had key people have shown me how that works. And that happened, the first time it happened was from a teacher. The second time was with a teacher. It was about what they observed in me. And it's not about being a star pupil. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on that was outside of a school environment that they were perceptive enough to pick up on and kind of do something about it. I didn't realize it at the time. It took me 30 years before I kind of realized what they'd done. And it's like, wow, that's significant. And then I'm at the age where you can do something with that information. As a young teen, you're not. So it's happened along the timeline. There's not one specific person that's had the most influence. It's all been a melding pot. The things that they all have in common is that they probably had more belief in me than I had in me.
How important do you think it is for a leader to believe in their people?
And it's the way I talk about it with a lot of leaders, is that when you're starting with a team, I work on the assumption, or I work on the premise, that my leadership bank account with this team is at zero. It's up for me to build up that bank account in what I do, how I do it, how the way I deal with conflict and all the rest of it. When I go in, every person in that team has got an account that's at 100%. So that's the belief I have in you going into that team. I have 100% belief that you can do the role that you're here to do, and that you'll do it across the technical components, the way you interact with people, and the way you contribute to this team and outside of the team. Now it's up to you to diminish that or keep it at where it needs to be. So that's the belief I have in the team when I go in. It's up to you now to demonstrate my belief in you, or reinforce my belief in you, or not. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. It comes from, I think, it was when you said about the number one thing they all had in common was they all believed in me more than I believed in myself. And I know for me, when I've been led by people who instill the same thing, like they believe in me more, that it makes you step up. But also too, then it can also, from a leadership perspective, can be the one thing that brings a team apart if you're believing too long and too hard and too fast. And I know that that's a fairly controversial statement. What do you think when I say that? Because yes, that's the thing that we all take away. We are under leaders who influenced us that really believed in us. And I think that's fairly universal. But then as a leader, sometimes we actually misplace that belief or let it extend too far. What's the bumper rails or the guardrails that you feel need to come into place with that sort of thing?
Okay. So the bumper rails or guardrail, when I say that people start at that 100%, I'm not expecting people to be star performer 100% of the time.
Yeah.
It's
that they can do what they need to do.
Yeah, they're delivering. Then there might be the threshold point, and let's call it 80%. And I'm noticing when it's coming down to 80%, and that's when we're having casual conversations around it. That's where the bumper rails start going up. So I've noticed something's happening. What's going on? What can I help you with? What can I remove? What kind of doors can I kick down? And I don't need leaders to be psychologists. We're not trained. And that's where some leaders say to me, well, I feel like I need to be a psychologist now. And it's like, no, you don't. But you need to understand your team well enough to know when something's not right. It's not your job to step in and be the counselor or be the psychologist, but it is your job to recognize when someone's struggling and find out what the reason of that is and how can you support them in that. Now, whether that's through an employee assistance program, whether it's like, well, you've given me this project and I just don't know what I'm doing with it. Cool. We could do something about that. So that's the first kind of guardrail that goes up. And that's what I put in place is protection and try and get leaders to know the team well enough that you can pick up when something's not right. Then you have that earlier intervention. Then if things are continually slipping, that's when you start having these harder conversations, which is part of your leadership gig, but you're doing it with a little bit of humanity. So there's further guardrails come up. So if you liken the analogy to 10-pin bowling, when your kids are there, I've got the gutter rails up. And now I've actually got the cradle that they can roll the ball down and aim the ball at so that they can get a better aim on things. So those are all the things that I start putting up. Invariably, there'll be times when people are underperforming, and people do for a whole bunch of different reasons, but you've been addressing it progressively along the way. I've not waited till it's reached crisis point. It's now, well, we've had these discussions and now it's a different kind of discussion, unfortunately. And that's the tough word. And that's the word that a lot of leaders try and avoid. They avoid putting the guardrails up and these bumper rails. They don't want to do that. It feels a little bit uncomfortable at first, but then if I don't put those rails up and allow people to bounce around on the aisle a bit, then when it comes to actually having to tear them down and have a really tough conversation, it is a really tough conversation because people aren't aware it's coming.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, because I also think when you're doing that, it makes the progression, it can sometimes be seamless, right? And it's a lot easier to get there. When we think about leadership and your career, and you think back, and you said you're getting quite reflective at the moment. We're going to move to your next stage in a moment. But what is your leadership superpower? What's the thing that you should own that you're really good at as a leader?
Gee whiz. I don't know that I've ever been asked that. What's my leadership superpower? I think my Superman cape would be distilling the current stuff that we've got into bite-sized bits, because that would be the biggest thing. It's one step. We'll worry about step 2 once we've done step 1. Let's get step 1 done. And steps 3 and 4, that's mine to worry about. You're not yours. You focus on doing step 1. I'll start thinking about steps 2, 3, and 4, so you don't have to. And then we'll bring you in when we get to that point. You just focus on what you've got to do.
Can I just say that's got to be one of my favorite ways I've heard expressed of how to be a great leader recently, because we're living in an increasingly complex world. You opened with saying leadership's too complicated, and most of our team, I know I did a very big piece of research almost 20 years ago now, and I was trying to understand why people stayed with toxic leaders, right? Why, if bad leadership is so destructive, why do people stay? And so I surveyed and interviewed almost 1,000 people both on the leadership side and the employer being led side. And the thing that I discovered was that we will stay with any leadership, good, bad, or indifferent, if it's consistent and if it is also incremental. And what I mean by that is I'm not overwhelming people. They feel as though they're in control of each step that I give them. So consistent and incremental will see people follow the worst kind of leaders off a cliff.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. So the incremental bit is actually not about you're going to lead people off a cliff. I just realized where that was going. But more that actually I've always found that incredible because the things we admire most in leadership are also the things that we don't. So I used to do leadership training myself, and I used to put up these incredible characteristics and traits of a leader and get people to guess who, like in history on a global stage, has exhibited these characteristics. And, nobody would get it because I was listening to characteristics of Hitler. But if you didn't have the context of the time and what he did and where he led them to, you were unable to identify that they were bad characteristics or good. So it's the intentionality of where you're taking people. But that step by step really works from a perspective of leading someone, whether you're leading them off a cliff or leading them to greater things. So I do love that. When it comes to, because a lot of what you're doing is to simplify, and I've seen that in action. This next phase, you're speaking, we've had conversations around, you wanted to give it a crack, and one last crack, I think, was your words. Why is it such a thing for you to go out and speak at scale about this and get people talking about this at scale? Like beyond what you can influence as a coach, as an internal leader, what's got your attention? Why does this matter?
It matters because people and leaders are unhappy at work. And it's not about, ball pits and pool tables and whatever other fancy thing will come in. But people are fundamentally unhappy at work.
I've never actually understood how a ball pit is a good thing, by the way.
No. I didn't like them when my kids were small. I certainly wouldn't want to jump in one now as an adult.
Just saying.
So the reason that I want to speak at this at scale is to demystify it, to let people know that we can all do something about it. And that doing something about it, first of all, takes a little bit of thought, and it's not complex thought. It's just really sitting down and thinking about where I am, and am I happy to be there? And if you're happy to be there, if you are happy with the predictably bad leader, because you know that you're getting bad Skewesy every day when you come into work, and not, do we get good, friendly, angry? If you know you're predictably going to get bad Skewesy every day, if you're happy to live with that, fine. Just get on with it. But most of us aren't. And there's something that you can change. And when you dig into the detail, obviously when you talk about it, you're not doing a teach. You're planting a seed, if you like, or just saying, this could be different if you want it to be. There are things that you can do if you want to. So we don't unpack what that is. But when you do, it can be just simple things that you introduce that can make, I might not succeed, but if I don't try it, I'll never succeed.
Mm. That one you just said about getting people just to think it could be different. There's a possibility that this could be different. Is that underpinning your driver here?
It is. It needs to be different. Because what are we going to do? We kind of mentioned when we first started this, we've got not a whole generation, but we've got a demographic generationally now that say we've seen what leadership does to people. We're not happy with that. We don't want it. We've got leaders leaving the business. So where are we? We're not at distributed teams yet. We're not at distributed leadership, or very few organizations are at distributed leadership or even want it if the reality was to be put on the table.
Reality is that they don't. We were involved in an organization at the forefront of that for about a decade. And the truth was everyone thought they wanted it. But when we put people in there, we had to do this incredible recruitment process because most people can't cope as leaders and as employees, because we are actually not conditioned that way, no matter how much is presented as an ideal scenario. And it's got too much risk in it. It doesn't pass the risk matrix that corporate uses.
No, it drives me because it needs to be different. We have to start thinking about it differently before we can start doing something differently about it. So if you believe that it can be different, then you can start exploring how can you do it differently or what can be done differently.
So you're doing this differently because you came in to learn into our world to find out more about speaking. You knew it existed as a thing. It wasn't brand new to you. What is the thing? We've been working together for 7 months. You've been in our world for close to a year now. What is the thing that you've learned the most about how to actually turn up and get people to listen to this message?
How you structure what you say. It's kind of ironic when you hear me rambling on here and you think, well, this guy doesn't have a clue about how to tell a story and be concise and to the point. So
I swear I taught you those things.
So I guess to how to get people to listen is to how to craft that message in such a way that you establish some credibility with people or some trust with people. And then you give them enough if I want people to think differently about this, if that's my prime driver in this, look, it can be different. I want you to think or believe that it can be different. Then that's what I've got to leave them with, not a portfolio of 10 models about how you do this. It's the belief that it can be. And that's what being in this has taught me, is to clarify that well. And we've spoken about this before. I delivered a keynote, I know the previous year to coming into the program, that I thought was okay. And it was okay. No, it wasn't. If I don't know, I'll take that back.
So March, you thought it was okay.
I thought it was okay. And then I've gone through this and looked at and seen where my keynote is now. And I look back at what I had and I thought, well, that was average at best. Because I was trying to give them so much about how to go and do rather than think and believe. And that's what it's given me, is that clarity of message.
Yeah, because changing how people do something starts with getting them to think differently, right? And if that wasn't the case, all the information is available on the internet on how to be a good leader. There are people who are more seasoned who are available to talk to. If it's like the information and the do is actually okay, we've got that covered. It's actually shifting how people think. When it comes to that keynote you now have, because I'm going to do full disclosure to our audience, I love what you've put together. Actually, not long ago, I said to someone, I love that ending you've got. And they're like, you helped me write it. I'm like, oh, that's right. But it's like, I do really love the keynote and the way that you weave us through and the way that you get us to think a little bit differently about it. What's been the personal growth point for you in doing this? Like, yes, we've got this gorgeous keynote. Yes, that's what you learned. What's been the growth that you've actually gone through with this?
That's not been fully realized. So what I'm thinking, and the reason I say that, I'm 80% happy with the keynote.
But you're only supposed to be 80% happy.
Yeah. But then from that, so the growth that I've got now, it's thinking, and this might be, it could be jumping the gun, but it's around what that needs to look like moving forward. And that's the growth I've got. So prior to starting this, I would have said, well, that's it. And I don't know where, I don't think it can go anywhere else. That's where it sits and it stays. Now it's evolved in my thinking, and that's where the growth has come from. So from a speaking point of view, the growth is coming. There was a little bit this morning with a coaching session with Ian Stevens. So thank you, Ian, for that, if you're tuning in. So that's around engagement, but where I'm looking at engagement around that is bringing improv into the engagement space. Because I ran an exercise, because I do talk about the simplicity of what I deliver or what I share, and it is simple. And I was challenged on it last week. Well, it can't apply everywhere. And I said, well, let's give that a crack, shall we? Start naming industries, organizational levels. And we broke them up. And I went through and actually went and ticked each one off. So whether it was talking about customer service, whether it was talking about sales, whether we're talking about product development and how that interfaces. So there's the growth that I've got, is looking at, so I'm thinking a little bit differently about what I've got, and then looking at what that next iteration looks like and how I can get greater engagement. And we spoke about engagement this morning on the session, and audience engagement. So this is something I was already thinking about prior to it. The second bit is, I have a love of improv theatre. And I was talking with somebody this week, and we're talking about how you bring improv into a leadership workshop to explore these concepts that I talk about around engagement, acknowledgement, and responsibility. Instead of having your typical experiential activity and marshmallow sticks and towers and things like that. And it's like, well, what can we do with improv in this space that's safe for people, but it actually really hits home what we're trying to talk about in that. So there's the other growth bit that I don't think would have happened necessarily without sitting down and really critically thinking about what I've got out of the time there and the way we think about the way you put your material together. And
yeah, I want to be in this thing with the improv, with the leadership training and workshops. I think that'll be amazing. And I love that that's where we're landing, because one of the reasons why I still do what I do is because actually there's no end point. If you actually become really, you may end up with a signature speech that you do tell all the time everywhere. And that's, as we know, how you grow a speaking business. But there is no end point. It is actually getting you used to the iteration and used to the exploration and used to where can I take this next. And so your through line won't change. A lot of your stories may not change, but this whole, what do we now do to make this more of an experience for the audience and not a performance, but an experience? How can I sharpen this story? What's the actual, where's this core message morphing to? And so I love that that's where you landed us, because that's actually, my job is done, right? It is absolutely about getting you on a stage and having you break through and getting things that people want to pay you for. But more than that is that understanding that there's no end destination here, right? It's literally having your mind open to those things about improv, right? To those things about, I mean, I remember a conversation where you said, I really want to bring improv into my speech, but I don't think I can. Like, you actually were very, I don't think this can come through. And so to hear you do this now is actually, I'm literally grinning for those who are listening, not watching. I'm literally grinning because this is the magic. This is when it becomes magical, because our mind is open and we're not going, oh, this is it, I've arrived, right? So every evolution that you do from this point on and where we've got you to already should be better than the iteration that you were before, right? But we never actually arrive. We just got to keep on the right track so that we're laying deeper tracks, but you don't actually arrive. And I love that that's where your mind is at right now.
that's when you can't see the whiteboard, but it's like a badly drawn out battle plan, if you like. It's a mess, but it's looking like a productive mess. So that'll sit up there and we'll stew on that for a bit. But that's where I'm going and thinking.
Yeah, I love that. And I love a good old productive mess. My place is full of, I don't have the whiteboard with swelling. I've got 1,000 Post-it notes all over the world. And I deliberately don't let anyone in that room because I'd have to actually clean it up. Paul, I'd love to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. I hope that the audience get a bit out of it. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where you do go with this thinking and the way your mind is working, the improv coming in. You've hinted at where you think you want to take this next evolution of your keynote. Whatever the future brings, I can't wait to be witness to it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Great talk.